Hey guys, got to see Infinity War, and here's my warning now 100% full spoiler review. If you haven't seen the movie, I don't want to hear you in the comments. You ruined it! I hadn't seen it yet! You're watching at your own risk, and if you type a comment like that, it won't be replied, it'll be deleted. You've been warned. So don't make me the villain if I spoil this for you. First off, good to very good, highly enjoyable, but there were glaring problems in this movie. Chief among it, and I understand, it needed humor or the movie could have been too draining. I don't know if I agree with that, but I'm the person who one year on a Memorial Day binge watched Band of Brothers and followed it down with We Were Soldiers, so what's draining to me is not draining to others. But the humor at times was just completely inappropriate or just too much of it. Case in point, a wonderful, or what would have been a wonderful scene between Star-Lord and Gamora, and she's trying to get Peter Quill to kill her if it comes down to it. She's like, I know where the Soul Stone is. You have to promise to kill me if it comes down to it, because he can never retrieve it. He can't. Promise me on your mother that you will kill me. And he's hesitant and agrees. And I felt like that should have cut to the next scene. And we cut to Drax eating a bag of chips or something, and a joke about, I can stand still like a statue and no one can see me. And it was one of those cases where the humor completely negated a great moment. And it was just, I could have done without that scene. I could have, at least 40% of the humor could have been cut here. There were some great, the stuff between Thor and Rocket Raccoon, keep it. I loved it. It was funny, but it was subtle. Even when the Guardians meet, well, the Guardians that are together at the time, minus Gamora, Thor, and Groot, when they meet, they get into a brief fight with Spider-Man, Tony Stark, and Doctor Strange, and Strange wraps his cape around Drax, and we get a comment about the cape being a death blanket, and that was pretty funny. The humor, when it works to me, it really works, but there's just other moments where it goes beyond softening the blow of a heavy scene. And here's one scene I'm going to point out too as a negative, and I'm fixing to get into the review. Tony Stark gets on the ship of one of Thanos' children. I mean, not Tony Stark, Spider-Man. He gets on one of the ships of Thanos' children, and they're obviously in the upper atmosphere. And he's like, Tony, it's getting hard to breathe. Really, Peter? You're supposed to be a genius. And you're telling me you're having a hard time breathing. Can't you figure out you're in the upper atmosphere? Now, I like a lot of the stuff, too, between Tony Stark and Doctor Strange, and I love how Doctor Strange makes no qualms about putting Tony down and insulting him like, you can't tell me what to do, unlike most everyone else in your life. I don't work for you, or just being belittling to him. That was great, especially because after Civil War, I wound up hating Tony Stark. And he did a lot to redeem himself in this movie for me. The movie begins with half the remaining Asgardians killed. Thanos is on the escaping Asgardian ship from Thor Ragnarok. I still need to see it, by the way. He has the Power Stone. He went to Xandar and took that, wiped out half their population. And I know enough about the movie Thor Ragnarok to know this beginning scene, it kind of spits in the face of Thor Ragnarok's ending that Ragnarok isn't that Asgard isn't a place as its people. Wherever we are, there's Asgard. Heimdall gets pretty unceremoniously killed after helping the Hulk escape. Loki gets killed, which this brings me to another point. If you have younger or more sensitive children, parents, you might want to think twice about taking them to see this movie, or at the very least, getting it on video and letting them see it before part 2 comes out, which is going to have the feel-good ending. This ending is pretty doom and gloom and despair, but that's what it should be. Anyway, Thanos wants the Tesseract. Loki left with it. If it had been destroyed on Asgard, Thanos' crest could have been stopped, so Loki, not to say this is all your fault, but you shoulder a lot of the blame for getting that stupid cube out of the vault. Thor is been brutalized. Loki shows up and he talks to Thanos and he's like, and we have a Hulk, and they get into a brief fight and Thanos beats the tar out of the Hulk. Again, I love that because in the comic book, he's so physically overpowered, the Hulk in the Infinity Gauntlet event, and that was great to see. And this sets up where Heimdall gets killed because he opens the Rainbow Bridge to send Hulk to Earth, which he arrives at the Sanctorum pretty much the same way Silver Surfer did in Infinity Gauntlet. It was an awesome callback. I love that part. Loki gives Thanos the stone, basically, in trade for Thor's life. And then he tries to kill Thanos. And Thanos kills him, and Thanos is like, no resurrections this time. I feel like because of how they made Loki look like he died at the end of Thor, and then did the same thing in Thor Ragnarok, it kind of softened his death. So then we get a scene with Strange and Master Wong, and it's one of the funny scenes I like where Wong's talking about how we don't believe in money and this and that, and Strange is like, well, fine, tell the people at the deli that. Maybe they'll conjure you up some kind of sandwich. And Wong reaches in, I have so many rapulis or whatever the Indian currency's called. And Strange is like, how much is that in English? American? He's like, oh, about $1.25. And it was a nice scene. It was subtle, but it was funny. And again, like I said before, I think the humor is at its best in this movie when it's more subtle than over the top. Again, just my opinion. So, Banner tells him all about Thanos. We get a scene with Tony and Pepper. He has a new arc reactor type thing on his chest, and it's more based on nanotechnology. Kind of a tip to the hat to what he became in the Extremis story in the comics. And she's mad about it. She's like, why do you need that thing? And Tony's talking about, I just feel like I need it in case there's a monster in the closet. We find out later that he's at least, since Avengers, had an inkling of Thanos, that he's been in his head. And we see Thanos is familiar with Stark later on. Doctor Strange shows up and basically pulls him away. And we get some, again, great banter where I love Strange because he'll insult Stark at the drop of a hat. He don't care. He's all business. Benedict Cumberbatch, for my money, gave the best performance in this film. He was the star. For Iron Man more or less being the most popular Avenger and arguably the face of the MCU, every scene we have with Tony Stark and Doctor Strange absolutely steals the scene from Stark. Great stuff. So, while they're arguing in the Sanctorum, we see Strange's hair blowing, and Stark's like, please tell me you're making your hair move. Well, it's Thanos' children on Earth, and we get a scene where Strange, Wong, Stark, and Banner team up, and it's great because Banner's been off Earth for a while, so it's good for him to catch up. He finds out that after the events of Civil War, the Avengers are pretty much broken up, and we really get to see Tony's remorse for his actions in Civil War in this movie, which helped me care for the character more. I wound up hating the character after Civil War, and again, I like him again now. Well, they go to fight, and the Hulk actually refuses to come out of Banner. There's points where he'll try to turn into the Hulk, and we'll just see the Hulk's face, and he'll, no! This is good and bad. It's a cool story option, but I do argue that Mark Ruffalo has been getting more and more boring as Banner with each continuing film. He was brilliant in the first Avengers. I loved every scene with him and Stark in it together. He was equally brilliant in his brief cameo in Iron Man 3. In Avengers 2, not so much. He was still good, but not as good. And in this one, I just found myself wanting to see the Hulk. No more puny Banner. But it was a cool concept, a double-edged sword. After suffering such a brutal defeat, the decisive defeat, the Hulk refuses to come out, and we see, like, Strange, when he opens up those portals with his power, we see a car cut off. We even see one of his children lose an arm. Keep this in mind, because it comes into a point later. Well, Strange gets captured, Spider-Man shows up, and this is the scene what I talk about. I'm finding trouble breathing, Stark. And Iron Man orders a satellite or something to launch something, and Spider-Man gets hit with a Iron Spider-Man suit. Tom Holland did not like a Spider-Man in Civil War. Loved him in this one. He's a phenomenal Spider-Man. I take back the bad things I said about his performance in Civil War, because he's done so much better. Again, see, I really like this movie. I just think it fell short of greatness. Part of the problem is just the stories just jumping around too much, back and forth. We'll follow this group, then that group, and there's a Vision storyline that for part of the movie feels like it's totally forgotten. Well, we cut to a scene with Wanda in the Vision, and he knows something's wrong with the Time Stone. They ultimately get attacked by Thanos' children. The Vision gets stabbed and loses his ability to shift, and spends most of the movie just... I don't want to say he was wasted, but I don't think he fully lived up to his potential either. And he gets rescued by Cap, Black Widow, and Falcon. And they wind up going to New York. We see Rhodes. He's walking around again, but he has apparatuses so we can move. I'm losing the light, so I'm going to pause this video and go to a more lighted location. So, I'll be back in a few minutes, which will be more like a second for you guys. Actually, you know what? I got enough light. I'm going to make this a two-part review. So, when they meet Rhodes, he's talking to General Ross, and when Ross sees the rest of them, he's upset, and Rhodes cuts him right off, and he's like, I just earned myself a court-martial, doesn't even care. He knows there's a crisis, and his military career means nothing at the moment. And they wind up going to Wakanda, and this is the end of my Infinity War full spoiler review part 1. This may go to 2 or 3 parts. I don't know yet, but don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe. Over and out.